Alright, so that was a big fucking werewolf. And so far, the only enemies we've seen are people who are either humans under the clear influence of beast blood, or who are well on their way to becoming werewolves themselves. And the Cleric Beast, in a later video, I'm going to talk specifically about how hypocrisy is a huge issue for FromSoft. They love to talk about man's inhumanity to man, and I think it's notable that in Bloodborne, the worst enemies, the more bestial ones, are those who have striven to hold the beast blood at bay for so long, but ultimately succumb to it in their own right. So look at Vicar Amelia, look at the Cleric Beast, who was a sort of... In fact, will the Sword Hunter badge tell us about the Cleric Beast? Oh no, hang on, that will be the... that will be this, right? Key item. No. Alright, fair enough. So you have to get this to progress through the game, pretty much, and it's annoying that you have to do it that way, but I guess it's almost a tutorial for how to actually use the messengers. I just wish it was a little bit more clear, because you could probably try for a long time actually to try and get through the game without buying that.
Very well. Let me...
Endurance not an issue for now, but maybe it will be for Father Gascoigne, as Wooly from Two Best Friends would say. Back to the hunt. You can see that I've got more insight there from having defeated it, the Cleric Beast. So as a sort of bridge between Gothic fiction and the werewolf myth, there was, towards the end of the Victorian era, Rudyard Kipling, who you might know, who might be more closely synonymous with other works. He wrote something called The Mark of the Beast in 1890. And I'm just gonna read from Terror and Wonder, because I feel like this is just to see how pervasive the werewolf myth is. We didn't have the werewolf myth in Britain, in part because the Anglo-Saxons completely eradicated wolves in this country. But so in The Mark of the Beast, it centres on how, on New Year's Eve, a drunken Englishman named Fleet desecrates a temple statue of the Indian monkey god Hanuman. Fleet is subsequently touched by a leper and transformed over the next day into a wolfish animal. And so you see, just in that short little vignette, that short description even of a book, how the tropes of werewolves being emblematic of a disease, of the degradation of the English, has been codified to the point where it becomes the premise of a book rather than sort of the plot of the book. I've never actually read that one myself. I just thought it's kind of like a fascinating little look into how well established the tropes have been by this point. So going to head back now to gonna head back to the sewers and maybe have a little bit of a discussion about how Yharnam is clearly, by the standards of any modern society, it's not the perfect society to begin with. There are these people who have been left, oh that was lucky, who have been left in, that was a counter hit, which is why I did it in one, who have been left to die in the sewers. This was not a fair and just society as it is. I don't know if you can see it from here, but maybe you can. Yeah, so you can see the cathedral ward over there, how much physically higher it is than the rest. There's a clear hierarchy to this city, and I love the moss on those bricks. That's fantastic. Every screenshot, every single angle is just phenomenal, and I particularly like it at sunset. I wish that more of the game had taken place during this. We're going to be playing through Henwick-Charn Lane at the bare minimum. I guess also at the maximum, to be fair. Oh, maybe Old Yharnam with this kind of sunset approach, because after a while the glow does fade and it's replaced by night. And yeah, it's got the same issues as Dark Souls 3, where the light fades, which is great. It's very integral to the story, but it really does limit what you can do with lighting effects in sort of the outdoor areas, some of which just look the outside of Yarnum now just looks unfucking believable. So, and as a sort of another example of how Bloodborne sort of feasts upon and makes constant reference to Victoriana, these rats are clearly plague rats. Their eyes are bulbous and gross, but you can the implication here is that they are, I'm not going to use that they are plague rats, and that plague is endemic to this as much as it was in Victorian era London and Britain as a whole actually, and Victorian era Edinburgh. So Mark of the Beast by Rudyard Kipling kind of marked this turning point where no longer it was almost the last hurrah, I might say, for why we're going this way, for the external becoming the cause of transmutation, of baleful polymorphism in Gothic fiction. Because after that, what you started to get was, Freud. As soon as Sigmund Freud and became a popular figure, a sort of influential figure rather, you saw that fuck these birds, fuck these birds. You saw that there were everything became allegorical, everything became synonymous. Dreams became a representation of the id, the ego, the superego, of the impulses and drives that every person has, but that kind of go sublimated because of adherence to social mores. And what's interesting is that there are a few pieces of fiction which that can be read explicitly as a sort of in that way. So, for instance, M.R. James, he wrote a story called "Oh Whistle and I'll Come to You, My Lad." He wrote that towards the end of what we might think of as the Victorian era, and I'm just going to read a section of what Gothic and of Terror and Wonder, the Gothic imagination, says about this, and that's a very atmospheric little bell there. So, so the tale is that of a professor who goes to a sort of allegorical Felixstowe, finds a whistle, blows in it, and then eventually finds that a stranger who he explicitly identifies as a gentleman has been in his room. And this is written less than a decade after the trial of Oscar Wilde, so there are still some, and there's still prejudice against gay people now. So I mean, what the fuck? So people had to write about this in allegorical and symbolic ways. But the book says, if we read "Oh Whistle and I'll Come to You, My Lad" as an encoded account of homosexual desire, we must surmise that Parkins is fully aware of the stranger's presence in his room, finding him monstrous only when he is tired of him. So here you can sort of see how, I hit the fucking microphone, how Gothic has gone from completely internalized, external things happening to people being influenced by outside affairs, whether that be the case of Peter Stubb, who said that the devil had given him a belt that allowed him to transform into a werewolf. Horror has become much more deep-seated and internalized. And now what people are afraid of is what's inside them rather than what might happen to them. And, partly that's because Victorian society was puritanical to an extent. Its treatment of women was, abhorrent at times. And, in a later episode I'm going to try and have my girlfriend talk about sort of, hysteria and how the treatment of women who were ill or mentally unwell was sort of, of how fucked it was, and how that's reflected in a lot of literature at the time, because she's very smart and she knows that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's sort of, that's the end of what you might consider old Gothic. And obviously Gothic fiction has descendants all the way down to, now. You can't watch a horror film without being aware that it's influenced by this sort of stuff. I mean, God knows how many modern renditions of Dracula and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde we've had. But Bloodborne has this relationship with Gothic that mirrors real life, the progression of real life Gothic fiction. At the moment, we've seen beasts strung up, we've seen people hunting, we've seen them obviously turning into beasts, and the implication at the moment is very much that this is something that has been visited upon this city. We know that blood ministration is its own thing. We know that to an extent the people have brought this upon themselves, but it doesn't reflect yet. The narrative hasn't told us anything about to what extent the people of Yharnam have brought this on themselves, or how Thumerians brought this upon themselves, and how deep this goes, and how central this is to human nature. All of which we'll get into in later episodes. I'm just going to shove my arm up this pig's backside. About which Freud would probably say nothing, because that's just a regular thing to say. But, so, the werewolf myth. My primary source of this is the Book of Wells, which was written by a priest called Sabine Baring Gould, who was just fascinating in his own right. When he was 34, maybe 36, he fell in love with an illiterate mill worker who was 16, and over the course of 2 years he subjected her. He gave her 2 years of very heavy education to, as he saw it, improve her, which later became the inspiration for Pygmalion. So not only was he sort of a prolific writer on the nature of superstitions and all this kind of folklore and everything, he became part of literature's history. And he talks about sort of the nature of skin changes in Old Norse mythology. So he talks about the 3 types of werewolf in Norse mythology. He talks about the fact that a lot of godly pantheons would frequently use transformation into animals for sexual purposes. So if you ever heard any of the myths about Zeus or anything, you'll know that he was constantly turning himself into swans to bang people. I don't know why a swan. I don't know why anyone would bang a swan, and how all this and how the nature of a baleful polymorph was both seen as a something that the gods would do, but also that they would use to punish people. And the implication in Bloodborne is that this beast blood epidemic has been sent to punish the people of Yharnam. Holy shit, that looks amazing. And one particularly interesting thing I read from the book is that holy shit, I forgot how beautiful this is that berserker, the term, what is that in the distance? Trees, presumably, but my god, that really is evocative of some of the ship masts we see coming up through in the Nightmare Frontier even. Holy shit. And yeah, he was talking about how the word berserker, one of the potential etymologies of it is literally from the Norse for bear skin, and how people who were berserkers would wear the skin of animals. And he thinks that's why a pervasive myth of the werewolf is that they can't change their eyes, because if they were just wearing skins, their real eyes would glitter through. And then he gives all these examples of how werewolves in fiction are, they retain some semblance of their humanity. This poor fucker, he did not die in a dignified position. He died in a yoga position, so at least he's got that. He's very flexible. And yeah, so you can sort of... There's very little English folklore, like I said, about werewolves, but it's all the way across Europe. And we do have some sort of similar things in the UK. We have a lot of mentions of Grimms, and the sort of the nature of Black Shuck and all these demonic dogs and everything, but wolves themselves are kind of gone. So what we have is this tradition from the Norse countries and from Vikings and all that sort of shit. And what's interesting is that in this book he just kind of highlights a load of examples that he's found from folklore, and how wherever there are wolves globally, you get the werewolf myth. Here we see Father Gascoigne. I forgot to equip the music box. I'm fucked.
Beasts all over the shop. You'll be one of them, sooner or later.
There you go. This is an inevitability. The decline of Yharnam society is an inevitability in Gascoigne's eyes. But you see, he's himself succumbed to that decadence, the nature of the beast. I'm fucked. There we go. Phew. He's tough. He's probably the first beefgate, and it's because he's here to teach you a gameplay mechanic. If you haven't been countering with your pistol, you're fucked. Uh-oh, I've got... He also has some fantastic music. Dart in. That's a hit. You can see how much that takes off him. If you were fighting him as you would a Dark Souls boss, just hitting and hitting and hitting, and you would be... you would not be doing fucking well about now. Sorry for all the swearing. I'm like Ricky from Trailer Park Boys. I can't express myself without swearing. And what I think is interesting is that swearing, or what you might think of as bad language, and what's that smell?
What's that smell?
Here he goes into a second phase.
The sweet blood. Oh,
Yeah, I
it
hate
seems
this
to me
phase.
It's enough to make a man sick.
There we go, disease again. I'm gonna ring the music box. I'm gonna ring the music box because I am backed into a corner here. Which is a free visceral attack, which is lucky because his third phase can easily fuck you up. It's ridiculous. I think I get one more of those before he automatically turns. Okay, but I can still counter, which is good. He's dangerous when he gets stuck behind the geometry like that because he can just dart out. Right, I'm going for it. Oh, he's gone for it first. You can still counter, it's just significantly harder. Like, this is where it also teaches you the gameplay mechanic, which just go fucking mental and attack. Oh, I fucked that up. You can hear the music's changed, it's a lot more urgent. So, shit, typically if I put him up here, I've not done great, so I'm going to try and back out. And run past his dead wife. Ooh, that was close. See that fucker? Oh no, he's right there. Excellent. Oh, they put you in this arena where you're literally just... I'm not being aggressive enough. If you're not aggressive enough in this game, you're fucked. Okay. One more. I'm not taking any chances. No! Oh my god. Where are you, fuck? There you go. Jesus fucking Christ. Stop backing away. He said backing away. I'm gonna get fucked. Unbelievable. Holy shit.